Hello guys, this is Kermani Games and in today's videos we're gonna talk about Ramses lineup. I was a long time trying to test what's better for Ramses, if it's Charlemage, Scipio, Lagertha, or which one of them in this lineup gonna goes better. And so I run many tests to try to discover this. And here is how I proceed the test. So what I did was I increased the power of my test by changing the amount of troops that I was using against the supply depot. Yeah, I am not a big fan to do tests over supply depot, but on this account, that was the only way I had to do so. So that's what I did. And here here is I am using tier 1s and 110k tier 1s. And what I did was I run this test and then I swap the heroes on the middle between Charlemagne, Scipion, and Lagertha. And also I switch many rings. So what I did was I run a test at this side 110, then I change it to this size here, that 165, 650, also tier 1s. And after this I changed the test to put 20Ks of tier 5, and the rest of the march was tier 1s. Was 7k less than this image, was 145, was not 152. It's because now my heroes are 155, and when I did my test the hero was 105th. And here was another test, then now I'm using 40k of tier 5s, and then tier 1s was 125. So this was how I managed to increase the power of my lineup to check how it's performed on a weak march, on mid march, and a strongest march, and a very strongest march. How it's performing in each scenario. And then also I changed the rings. The first thing was Ramses was always using serpent ring. That was the ring on Ramses. And then I switch the heroes. So I switched the rings over the other two heroes. Lofty Mountain, level 30. Also, I use a Skyward, level 30, that I also switch. And then also a Sage ring, that's only level 20. It's not 30, unfortunately, but also we can see the effect anyway. And here is the hero used at the time of the test. They were 150, not 155. But this is the skills used on each hero: Lagertha, Scipio, and Charlemage. As you see, they are all 5 stars, all skills max. And was the setup used. And what I was doing was swapping this position between the heroes, keeping the rest, and also checking, for example, Skyward here, and I keep switching these to make my test. And now let me present you the data. Just a second. So first things first, this is the weakest March, right? And what I have here is I did a test with 110k, and how I am presenting you the data here is by the amount of damage performed. So here I use enough troops to be sure that in the most of the case I was coming close to defeat, but I was not defeating the target. That was the main purpose here. So this was my first test, and here when the march is very weak, the best one by far was Scipio, as you can see. He was by far the best one. Also, as you can see, the rings, Lofty Mountain and Sage, the both tank rings, was performing a way better than Skyward. A way better than Skyward. Even uh, when I try Skyward here, it goes less damage dealing, what was not the most expected. But here, the fact is, the reason is the marsh was weak, so I could not perform very well with attack rings, and the defense ring was going away better. And of course, you can look here that with Skyward, right? If you look here, the Skyward imprint a bigger DPS than the Sage and Lofty Mountain, that's 15k. The Skyward can do 18k DPS. It's a way higher, but it dies also a way faster. As you can see, this Lofty Sage, I could stay for in average 1 minute and 5 seconds, while with Skywards was only 50 seconds. So here it's 15 seconds more, and this 50 seconds more make me do a way more DPS. And that's why when I was more weak, the Lofty Mountain and the Sage was making a lot more difference. And when you go to Lagertha scenario, that Lagertha, let me refresh the, and when you see Lagertha, that is over here, this is Lagertha, you see the same. That's Lofty Mountain and Sage was the winner. And as you can see, the same, you has a higher DPS with Skyward than with Sage in Lofty Mountain. But the fact that you stay longer, like for example, with Sage and Lofty Mountain, Lagarta was staying for about 40 seconds, while with Skyward was only 32. So this make all the difference that here the DPS was 22k, but he could not perform it better than Loft and Sage. And as you can see, the winner was Scipio, even though the DPS with Scipio is a way lower. It's 15k. It's a way lower. And then Charlemagne was also not performing very well, even though his DPS is a way higher than Scipio, as you can see under here. But because he could not think it very well, he was not performing very well. And let me do this. He was not performing very well. And of course, the same happens to Charlemagne, that Lofty and Sage was a way better than Loft and Skyward. And this was the first test with a weak march, so very close to defeat the supply depot, but not defeating the supply depot. And if I run the test only at this way, I would recommend you to say you should use Scipio, because he was the one who's performed better, and Skyward is not a good ring, and most of the people will not agree with that, even myself. So I run a way more tests to try to understand why this happening. So let's go to a more powerful lineup, and I'm gonna present you the data. And here we are, and here, as you can see, it's a little bit more powerful lineup, 155k. So now I am using 155k troops. And on this scenario, you can see that Scipio is still in first place, because what I'm comparing here, because I see that all lineups, not all, but almost all of them was being able to always killing the target, right? Um, and except by Lagarta with Skyward, that he sometimes die and not even kill completely the target. But you can see that the DPS here, right? The higher DPS was again Lagarta, but I am ordering the data here by damage taken, because these in this scenario when you have an average march, not a very strong, but also not a very weak. And on this scenario, you still have Scipio a little bit ahead, right? Because even though his DPS is lower, he can end the fight with way more troops because he only took 55k damage. And when I was using Lagertha, she was taking 82 damage, even though her DPS was a way higher. And on this scenario, we still in the same way where Lofty Mountain and Sage Rings was the winner, Skyward was losing, and we have again the winner being Scipio, and that was the scenario. And then let's check now the strongest versions of this march. And here is the strongest version. What I'm using here is I am using 20k of tier 5, and the rest, that's 145k, are tier 1s. So that's what I'm using here. And here, of course, the damage was always full defeating. So damage, pure damage could not be compared anymore. So now we could see who was the strongest and who's not by the timer, because the timer is gonna define the DPS. And you can see here that the DPS of Lagertha, it's the best one. And then you can see Lagertha with Skyward now was the winner. Lagertha, I didn't test Lagertha with Lofty Mountain on Zulian because Zulian performed better with Sage. It's what I could noted overall. So I not even test on this scenario here. And then you can see that she took away more damage. Like from the lowest damage one, there is this one. This is the lowest damage taken, and also almost the lowest damage dealing. And I lost 55 more troops. So as you can see, I was losing. Let me refresh the marks. So on the first one, I was losing 60k, when on Scipio, I was losing 41k on his best DPS. But and the DPS here are very close between each other, right? But here you already see that the amount of troops that you are losing is not that big deal, but you can perform better now when you have Lagertha than you have Scipio. Also, the ring switch that now Skyward is the winner in overall, then when you use the non-Skyward versions. And then I would like to show you and present one more, that is the 40k. So let me refresh the marks, and here are the 40k version. And on here you already see a big difference. When you have a strong Ramses, that it's kind of my scenario, and that is why I always thought that Lagertha was better. And when I see whales and krakens playing, I see that Lagertha was performing a way better than Scipio. And on this scenario, you can see that you lose more troops with Lagertha, yes, because you're taking 42k damage compared to 38k damage, as you can see here, 42 compared to 38k. But the DPS is brutal different. Like this is the DPS with Scipio, and here is the DPS with Lagertha. So Lagertha does 143k from the lowest DPS, when Scipio was doing only 115k from the lowest DPS, that was in this case here over Charlemage. So what I can tell you running this test, and this is my analysis, is if you were and if you have a weak Ramses and you always overpressure it, what I mean is when you are fighting over the field, when you're fighting against your enemy, you were always ending in a very lower number of troops position, or you can't do many fights before you retreat. So yes, CPU can goes better for you, but for example, if what you want from Ramses is the same as me, that is destroy CPUs as fast as possible, and you can stay for a long time in the field, I would say that the best scenario is Lagertha use Skyward and Lofty Mountain, and using Serpent like this setup here is, let me remove the marks, and this setup here in my opinion is the way to go if you have a big strong march and you want to not use Miyamoto, and then you can put Lagarta over here, and then you can do a lot of damage and defeat and destroy Cyrus away faster because the DPS is a way higher. And of course, if you were asking yourself about p-values and blah blah blah, of course, sorry, of course I had calculate them, and I calculate for all my tests. And even though, as you see here, the countings were lower countings, but I run many and many tests, and I was checking the p-value, and I was moving on because the p-value was showing me that the data was statistics relevant to be enough so that I could move on to another setup, because I need to run so many that I could not do like on the beginning here that I was running with 30 samples each. Just here was 210 just to run at 110 key. So when I was running over here, I was giving up to do so many tests to give you more data and more input and try to not give you the wrong information. And I hope these also work for everyone as a lesson that it's not because you make a test and something happened that could be exactly the same in a real fight. Because as you see, when you was running tests where the march was weak, that I simulate the weak of the march, reducing the amount of troop numbers, you could see that CP wins better. But as much you was become stronger and you was reducing the amount of time that you need to defeat the supply depot that now was 34 seconds, you could see that Lagarta goes a ways better and how much you can destroy it. And also, oh, I almost forget to comment this. It's and the reason because Lagarta is so good is because Lagarta can give you a 65% chance to give you an extra damage every turn. And Ramses do command skills, no, sorry, do signatory skills every turn. And that is where the magic goes. And as you can see here, like the number of signatory skills per cycle with Lagarta, it's about 4 each cycle. And in a cycle of 3 seconds, you in average has 4 casts using Lagarta, while you have only 2.3, 2.4 cast use Scipio, and you have 2.7, 2.5 cast using Charlemage. Because Charlemage also give you extra cast, Scipio does not give you any extra cast, so you can say that the regular one is this 2.34, 2.45, so it's about 2.4 is the normal cast per cycle. And when you put Lagarta increase this by a lot. And this gonna make a lot of difference because when you engage in a Cyrus, you don't need 9 seconds to start to do damage. You're gonna do from the very beginning, and when you jump in the 9 seconds of command skill, you're gonna hit like a truck because you're gonna cast non-stop. And that what's make this setup shine. So in my opinion, if you want to give up on Miyamoto lineup, you should use Lagarta, not Scipio. Except, of course, you are in a very weak position, then you can use Scipio that can provide you more tankiness. So that's for today's video. I hope you had enjoyed. Thank you very much for watching, and I'm gonna ask you to please drop a like if you have any doubts about the test, you can drop a comment. Also join my community on Discord. We have a lot of good people that has a lot of knowledge of the game, and we discuss a lot of the game. You are free to join us, and feel free also to support me over the coffee. Thank you very much, and we see you in the next episode. Bye bye.